Welcome, everybody, to Rates and Barrels. And yes, it's just me, but not for the whole show. We've got Geoff Pontes from Baseball America coming on later, and he will give us a little quick tour around the minor leagues, get us some minor league prospects behind Jack Caglione, behind Roman Anthony that might be on their way up, as well as some names that might be on the move onto top 100 lists, things of such nature. Again, thank you so much for anybody who's left a review for us. Please like the video and subscribe if you can. Join the Discord. We're all talking over there about the things that we put on here. I try to put the visuals that we put on this show up on Discord, and plenty of channels there to find leagues or discuss pickups and drops. It's a lot of fun over there, and I'm sorry that I don't have someone to throw it to. I'm sorry I don't have DVR, and I'm sorry I sound like this. This is day 14 of a sinus infection. We are going to bang this out with the doctor later, and I will be ready to go on Monday, I believe. I hope. This has been way too long, but we have some news to get to first. One of the biggest pieces of news that came across the desk was that the Rays option Chandler Simpson, the speedster, had been providing stolen bases. So for fantasy owners, that might have been a surprise. But if you were tracking real life work, it wasn't really that exciting. Not much power. We knew that he didn't have much power, but he didn't even have really doubles power. What we also saw was the small sample, but still existent major league poor results with the glove, and the outs above average was below average. I think the eye test was also that not as great a center fielder as you might expect given the tools. So it ended up being kind of a one-note option. There are other players on this roster that could have gone down over Chandler Simpson, but this was the decision they made in the short term. I'd expect him to be up, but they're just going to have to go elsewhere for your stolen bases. The other news was that the Marlins designated Ronny Simon and Matt Mervis. They've been kind of going through different options, basically AAA quad A options that project all right, that, are close to big leagues. A lot of them strike out too much. That just proved to be the case with Matt Mervis, who had a 208 ISO backed by okay barrel numbers. But a 37% strikeout rate is just not going to make it work. And that's 35% for his career in the major leagues for Matt Mervis. I bet you he gets another shot, but it's hard to see where it'll be right now because the Marlins are kind of the last chance saloon for these types of players. Ronny Simon, this is just a sad story because Ronny Simon made 3 errors in a game against the Padres and was crying on the field. And he must have felt like, a lot of pressure to make good of this chance because he's been with the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, the Rays. And even with the Rays, he was regarded as one of their top 20 prospects, not a top 100 overall, not maybe a difference maker, but someone who could make contact, take walks, help in different facets of the game. If he's not helping with the glove, though, that kind of profile does not, move the needle for major league clubs. I mean, at this point, we're talking about a 25-year-old who's slightly above average in AAA and doesn't help with the glove. So I don't know. I think he'll be, a depth acquisition for somebody that might want to play him as a utility player. There, you kind of emphasize that he can play some places okay, and he swings the bat from both sides of the plate. So I'm a little bit more upbeat on Ronny Simon's chances to get another shot at the big leagues than Matt Mervis, just because of that versatility. But we have some. Do we have some good news in here? Heriberto Hernandez is up. I mean, does that count as good news? Heriberto Hernandez is up as part of those moves for the Marlins. He's 25. Guess what? He strikes out too much and he projects pretty well, and he's a AAA guy. So they're just going to give him a shot in the kind of Matt Mervis role. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be first base, but it's another guy where you're going to watch the swinging strike rate early and try to see the bat speed numbers, I think, and the hard hit numbers, and see if the hard hit numbers can outpace his strikeout concerns. That's only a deep league thing. We do have some bad news, good news combo here. AJ Smith Shawver got hurt between our last show and this show, and he felt a pop in the elbow. And just by the end of the day, he was on the 60-man IL. So not good news. Everyone's saying that it doesn't look good. We haven't gotten the final news on what exactly it is other than an elbow strain. That can be anywhere from Tommy John to some time off. But the good news is that Mike Trout is back, and the league is better for having Mike Trout in it. He did complete a bit of a rehab assignment. He managed to wait. I thought he was in a rehab assignment. Where is this? Maybe it was in the complex league or something, because it's not registering on Fangraphs as minor league stuff. But what he was doing before, I think he can do again, is hit for power, steal a couple bases. I think there's a real question starting to bubble up about what his true talent batting average is going to be in the decline phase of his career. His strikeout rate's not so bad in some years that you'd expect the batting average to be bad. Like last year, Mike Trout had a 21% strikeout rate and still only a 220 batting average. To some extent, he's been fine with just launching fly balls, looking for homers, and that's going to eat up his average. So I know that there are projections as high as 262 for his batting average going forward from the Bat X. I just don't know if I believe it with a 50% fly ball rate. I'd expect Mike Trout to be more like a 230, 240 hitter with great power and a couple steals, but he may not any longer be an asset when it comes to batting average. So I think that's just something to think about when you're preparing your bid in the leagues, or if you're trying to buy him, maybe ahead of a push for the postseason in your league. Just don't count on him for batting average. We also had some news in the reliever front. Alexis Diaz was sent to the Dodgers, and I thought this graph would be interesting. Alexis Diaz, when he came into the league, had 5 inches less arm side run on his four-seamer. And I think that's important because with relatively the same arm angle, he is now throwing a pitch that looks much more like the arm angle projects him to throw it. So basically, he has a 17-degree arm angle. And so people expect when they see that to see a lot of arm side run, because it's kind of the sinkerish arm angle. And that's been part of why his stuff numbers have been low. And I think that's part of why he's been hit around. Obviously, another part of this is that he does not have good command. But if he can be more like Spencer Schwellenbach. Spencer Schwellenbach has a low arm angle, and he cuts his four seam so that it doesn't have this arm side run. If Alexis Diaz can do that, and despite having that low arm angle, throw something that's a little bit more unique, he can get back to the higher stuff numbers that he had in his first year in the league. I don't think that this is necessarily going to turn into, the Dodgers' next great closer, but they've also used more relievers, more relief innings than anybody else in the big leagues. And if you could get Alexis Diaz back to a 30% strikeout rate, then you can handle a 12% walk rate, and you can handle the bad command. And so I think that's what Alexis Diaz needs to do, is basically cut the four seam a little bit like he used to. I don't think that they need to add a whole new pitch or rediscover, gold with him. I think it's more just, I guess also he used to throw 95.7. He's throwing 93 now. So if there's something they can find mechanically to regain that velo, that'll be part of it. But they don't have to play him in the major leagues right away. And this could just be depth for them. Like I said, they've been using so many starting pitchers and so many relievers that they're going to need this. Michael Kopech, just as an update that's related to this, is making several more rehab appearances. That's what it said on 5/19. So that's a little bit weird that we've had to wait this long. I mean, a minor league rehab stint that's how many appearances deep now? 8 appearances deep for Michael Kopech. He has a 29% walk rate. Yeah, I know you expected me to say strikeout rate. 29% walk rate, 27% strikeout rate, but there's something going on with Michael Kopech. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide that is still injured, that there's something that they need to fix in that arm because there's not, no news is not good news for Michael Kopech. He should be up in the big leagues by now. Relievers don't have long stretches like this in rehab usually. So I don't know what's going on there. It's not good news. And the acquiring of Alexis Diaz sort of points to that direction as well. We've got some news about position changes, I guess. I mean, neither one of these is playing a new position that they've never played before, but they are playing in a new place maybe going forward. Jazz Chisholm on his rehab stint has only played third base, and it seems like that's likely where he's going to play when he gets to the big leagues. Now, he's played enough all over, I think, in most leagues that he'll still be eligible in different positions next year. But this is something to think about long term. If he settles in there, I think he's slightly less valuable as a third baseman. That's up for debate, but with 29 games started at second base, that's not anything to worry about until 2027, really. So that's eons in fantasy. So you can still consider him a second base / third baseman for fantasy purposes. A guy who gets injured all the time, but shows amazing flashes of promise when he's in. So he's still going to have us at the trough every year. Xavier Edwards is making a somewhat predictable switch over to second base, and that'll help him in the short term by adding an eligibility in leagues, but it will hurt him because I think that some people thought that Xavier Edwards would just be, in a dynasty situation, someone they could plug in at shortstop for steals and steals alone, maybe a deep league shortstop for a while. That wouldn't be great, but wouldn't be terrible. He's a lot less exciting, I think, at second base. And it just points to some of the flaws in his game with zero power and zero glove, or not zero glove, but not great glove and not enough glove for shortstop. The margins for him being a major leaguer are extremely thin. If you just look at his projections, something like the Bat X gives him an 88 WRC plus going forward. If he's not a shortstop any longer, this is going to be a player that puts up like 1 win above replacement, 1.5 maybe in a full season. And that is not a starting level player on most teams. I know that most of us don't play in war leagues, but that doesn't matter when your major league teams, as we saw with Chandler Simpson, make decisions based on things like war, based on things like defense. And so that can affect you in your leagues. Just a couple more pieces here. Royals release Renfroe. The release went through. We'll come back to the guys who were short-term replacing him, but this is of course, a Jack Caglione update. And so we're just going to keep breathlessly updating these things. Jordan Lawler was sent down. The corresponding move was for a utility player that's going to be a better fit for what ended up being Jordan Lawler's role. He was up for a while, but he didn't play much. He played at second some, at third some. He had 2 or 3 game stretches where he didn't play at all. And so the news is that a more utility prone player will come up. Doesn't really affect anything other than Jordan Lawler's future, which seems to be that he's going to come up next time if there's a major injury on that infield, or to play for good next season. I don't think what he did in that short sample should really turn you away from him long term, but he hasn't he's not unassailable, and so that might make him gettable in dynasty leagues. Maybe you go and try to buy him now because his owner is a little frustrated. But just know that, for me, he's not necessarily an unassailable top prospect. It's not like, I traded George Kirby at a reasonable price for Jack Caglione just because I'm totally enamored with like how hard he hits the ball, and just like I said yesterday on the show, his quads of steel. I think there are things you can say about Jordan Lawler, which are like, how much of the power is real? What's his true talent strikeout rate going to be in the major leagues? What is his position going to be in the major leagues? I think those are enough questions that I would be a little careful with making a huge spend when it comes to Jordan Lawler in the future. And it looks like we have our first guest. Hello, Geoff. How's it going?
Pretty good. Eno, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on the show. I am 2 weeks into a sinus infection, and Derek Van Riper is moving. So you are a sight for sore eyes. Thank you so much.
Hey, no problem.
What was your old handle? Is it Prospect Jesus?
Many moons ago, it was Prospect Jesus, and at that point, before I went, full time as a baseball writer, I had a professional job, so I didn't use my real name until about 6 months before I got hired by BA, and that was obviously intentional because I wanted to kind of make the switch from business sort of, customer facing kind of jobs to that. So once I didn't have to worry about customers any longer, I went with my real name and not Ralph.
We were at a game somewhere where someone just yelled out Prospect Jesus, and I was like, what? And I'd forgotten that was your old handle. That's great. But now you're a muckety muck. You're a man among men here at the Baseball America. It's a great role for you. I know that I'm super happy for you that you've been thriving in that role, and you're coming on today to tell us a little bit about prospects. I think we've been salivating, waiting for a Jack Caglione. There's the Passan article, and Roman Anthony obviously is in that mix. But I think when we do stuff like that, we forget sometimes about the other guys that are on the way up. So just wanted to give you a chance to highlight some guys who are not named Jack or Roman that may make an impact this year for our listeners.
Yeah, and I think you don't even have to dig too far. There's other sort of top of the top 100 prospect list, not just ours. Obviously, there's a lot out there in the industry, but I do think there's typically a general consensus on, top 50 to like 70 players. And, I think there's a couple of pitchers in AAA right now, as well as a handful of hitters that, potentially can come up and have impact. And it could even be, within the next few weeks. Two guys that stand out for me right off the top are Bubba Chandler and then Jacob Misiorowski of the Brewers. Chandler, I think, was, kind of one of the more notable names, whether you're playing fantasy and redraft or just a fan of, the game. One of the more known prospects. And, I think the dream, at least for Pirates fans at this point, is that, Chandler, with the Jones news, will sort of come up and ascend in that number 2 role. I don't know how soon it happens. Obviously, Braxton Ashcraft was the last one who got the call up. But I do think that it's probably within, a matter of weeks, if not days, until, he does make his first start in Pittsburgh. It's big stuff, huge fastball velocity. There's good ride on it. It's like maybe 17 to 18 inches of induced vertical break, kind of depending upon where he's pitching and,
it's kind of a two-planer, right? Like it has some run on it too, right?
Yeah, it's more of like that I'll say typical like Garrett Cole kind of fastball where it's like 17-9, 18-9, 18-10, in terms of the vert and horizontal. It's not really like a cut ride fastball that you're seeing with a guy like Chase Burns or somebody like that. But it's also like a low release height, like low VAA, high like four seam, like spin efficiency type of a fastball as well that just plays at the top of the zone, but can play all over the place. I think the development of the secondary stuff, there were some questions on the slider. He's always had feel for the changeup, but especially as a right-hander, having a quality breaking ball that can generate swings and misses is obviously a big part of it. So he's shown way more command. It's had better snap and sort of feel. Generally, his movement has been good. He throws it really hard. I think it's, more of like a cut gyro sort of high 80s, low 90s sort of slider. But I think Chandler's one in particular that's really interesting.
Well, just on Mizorowski, like I'm surprised our model has him with above average locations on the fastball and around average on the slider. It really says he struggles to locate the curveball.
Yeah.
And I'm when I saw, I remember when Hunter Brown came up, the scouting grades were terrible on his command, but the location plus numbers were okay. And he's kind of borne that out. There's been, some of that with other players, and then there are other players who, you don't think have a command problem and have come up and been worse. But and I'm not saying this is necessarily predictive, but what have you seen on the command front? Because that's the biggest thing with Mizorowski.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we've kind of dug into in recent weeks, and I know my colleague, JJ Cooper, I think actually wrote a little bit about it, but the strike rate just in general is usually pretty indicative, particularly in the minors of, how decent your command is, not necessarily control and, all that, but, how are you using your chase pitches and all that sort of stuff to actually generate strikes, right? Because it's more than just getting the ball into the zone. It's command is really like hitting spots and locating, right, etc. So, I think with Mizorowski, it's just the delivery has gotten cleaner. He's just more direct to the plate more consistently. The release heights are closer and more clustered than they had been in previous years. Nice. And I think, everything's now sort of playing off of that fastball because he's commanding that pitch. Looking back last year, I think the zone rates and the strike rates and the slider actually weren't bad. They when I kind of color coordinate all of my spreadsheets, like they were above average. They were green, but it was always like the 59% sort of strike rate on the four seam that was an issue. And it's a great pitch. It's another guy, he gets tremendous extension, 7.3, 7.4 sometimes, depending upon the pitch on that four seam, which obviously lowers the release height, pretty high efficiency. So he's a guy where it's maybe 15 or 16 inches of induced vertical, but it's from a lower release height. So it plays up a little bit. And, that pitch, just being able to locate it consistently and hit spots, just kind of allows all of his secondary stuff to cascade off of it. He uses the curveball really like as his off speed. It's, what he's using to, offhanded batters. It's one of those sort of setups. So be interesting. But I think when we look at the Brewers' track record of developing pitching, they do a really good job of these guys that have these relief risk questions attached to them. Recently it was Freddie Peralta. Before that, it was Corbin Burns, who was in a relief role initially, and even like Brandon Woodruff. So I think they consistently sort of take in guys like this that have these questions and figure something out in terms of the command and execution, because it has been almost night and day this year. And it's allowed him to go deeper into starts. He's not one of these 4 or 5 and dive guys any longer. He is getting into the 6th inning more consistently. And I think, innings are indicative of being able to start in the major leagues.
I think that they have something in common with the Rays. And Tobias Myers told me that, when he was with the Rays, it was a little bit, they have one target until AAA. And then, he went to the Guardians. He said the Guardians had a much more detailed game plan about throwing to this zone and throwing to this zone and throwing to this zone. He said when he got to the Brewers, it was a little bit more like the Rays. It was like, just throw good stuff in the zone. Mostly not necessarily just one target, but just, simplifying things. So I bet you they went on that. So what do you have on bats that might come up? I mean, there's something weird about the current environment, which is that there is this, the very best bats, I think, are more likely to play in the big leagues from the beginning of the season, because if they can win them hardware, they can bring back something. There's incentive there for the teams. And then that leaves this sort of middle. So we're not really, other than Roman and Jack, we're left with, I don't know. Are there exciting bats that are, top 50 even, or top 70?
Yeah. And I think, the other part of it too is, years ago, before AAA started messing around with, it's the challenge system now. Last year it was full ABS for 3 days, and then it was the challenge system for another 3 days. And the full ABS really benefited hitters, especially if you were a little bit passive, because the zone honestly was tighter than what we're used to in the major leagues. And the zones historically, going back to 2018, I think there were studies on this. They typically get smaller as you move up, the chain or the ladder of the minor league systems. But you get to the major leagues, and obviously that was usually the best zone, the tightest zone. You were going to have them, the least amount of leeway as a pitcher. And I think what happened with the auto zone is like, if you're 1/4 of an inch off and you're in that like gray zone, that's historically a strike your entire life. And then all of a sudden it isn't. So that was frustrating, I think, for pitchers. But what it did is it masked a lot of inconsistencies in terms of swing decisions with a lot of hitters. And so what I noticed last year in particular is the guys that were coming up to AAA as hitters seemed to have a harder adjustment to the major leagues in the zone, because they weren't getting the same calls, because it wasn't like this clustered ABS system. And there was, obviously some nuance to it with an actual human being behind there calling balls and strikes. So, I think with a lot of hitters, that's a big hurdle to overcome. And it's kind of the opposite for pitchers, where at least a lot of guys that I talked to that pitched in AAA early in the season, and then
it's easier up here.
It was actually easier. Like, I'm getting more calls here, stuff that I was not getting in AAA, and my walk rates plummeted or whatever it might be. So I think it's a little balance of that. Now, that said, I do think there's kind of a trio of bats that I'm looking at here where I think there could be potentially some opportunity. We'll see how Baltimore sort of plays the next month or two, but they're certainly not in a great spot to make the playoffs or to compete or even be considered a contender or a buyer. At the trade deadline. Does that mean that somebody like Ryan Mountcastle is maybe moved, et cetera, to a contending team? It might be the right time to do that for them at some point in the next couple of months. That could open up opportunities, I think, for Samuel Basallo. Their big catching prospect.
He has enough bat to play at first base?
He's a bat first player. Predominantly the throwing, he's got a big arm, but it is a big body behind the plate. The blocking and receiving isn't great. He's not going to supplant Adley Rutschman as an everyday, option back there. But I do think the bat, just in terms of the marriage of contact quality and bat to ball ability, is there.
Oh my God, 116 mile per hour max exit velocity, 54% hard hit.
It's Jack level sort of power. Like, I don't know if it's quite like the same top end. Like, he might be like, if Jack's an 80, he's a 75, on the 20/80 scale. But there's a lot of bat to ball ability. And I would say that, especially based on his age, because he's younger, it's a more advanced approach. He's not a guy that is overly passive. So really high zone swing rates, which is something that I really look for when I'm trying to, like, a context of, of actual true plate approach and plate discipline skills.
We used to love chase rate here. And then we found that if you marry it with zone swing, you get more predictive. Yeah.
And I think like there's some nuance too, in terms of like swing rate and the chase rate, and like, what's the delta between those two numbers, where you start to get like a 20% or higher sort of, or I guess like a 20 point or whatever, delta between those two numbers. And then you have a high zone swing rate. It's like, all right, that's really good approach. This guy's actually recognizing balls and strikes, as opposed to being super passive and not swinging, maybe only swinging the bat 30% of the time or 34% of the time. We do see that with a lot of guys. I think that was like Nolan Jones's issue, where he put up these huge walk rates and great numbers. And really, when he made that adjustment and had some success, at least for a season with the Rockies, it was because like Cleveland really made it a point to be like, we need you to swing more.
Right.
We need you to attack more. So when that's kind of not present with a guy like Basallo, I'm confident that he's going to attack strikes. He's going to hit pitches in the zone. When he sees fastballs, he's going to do damage. And he's got adjustability in the barrel too. He's a guy that, can adjust on spin, stuff that's low or high in the zone. The hands are pretty gifted. They're not, stiff or anything like that. I think he's a guy that could come up and, potentially give them some instant offense, and could factor into that Baltimore lineup, over the next couple of years, depending on
projections. Projections are never like super excited about prospects, but they almost as a unit say he'll be an above average hitter, which already catches my eye.
Yeah, and I just think like when you start to look at historical data, because like that's what like we do with our fantasy model that we have at Baseball America through my colleague Dylan White, the RoboScout model. It's really looking at like historical perspective and how that sort of lines up with production, for age and level based stuff. And he's always been one of the youngest players wherever he's played and been really productive.
So that's a big part of why the next you got like the next guy Cole Young you had on this list, and he's 21 in a AAA and doing great. One thing that I worry about sometimes, and I think maybe his maybe it doesn't matter so much. Maybe he's so good at a lot of different things that this won't matter. But like when you have these like 180 ISOs in the minors and you also have legs, then I'm like a little bit worried that you're getting to doubles with your legs, and you're not necessarily maybe hitting the ball that hard. Now we got some data this year with a 44% hard hit rate from him at AAA, but a 109 max EV still leaves me a little bit cold. So what do you think his true talent power level is? Do you think it doesn't matter because his defense will float him and his OBP will float him? And there is a relationship between power and OBP too. So it's is he going to get the bat knocked out of his hands basically?
Yeah, I think, I was not a big Cole Young guy coming into the year. He's been on a real burner in May, probably one of the top, 15 or so hitters in the minor leagues over the last month. What he's showing, though, is significantly more power than he had in AA previously. So just looking like year over year, 90th percentile EV. It's been a 4-mile-per-hour climb. It was like 100-mile-per-hour 90th last year, and it's more like 103.9, 104 now. We're seeing more. He's hitting the ball.
What's like a major league average on 90th?
It's like 104.2, I think, was what I looked at for last year. Okay. So, it's somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
He's got a ton of bat to ball skills in addition to adding more power, and the angles aren't great. Like he's not a guy that's putting the ball in the air consistently to the pull side, which for a smaller guy like him, I think is really important if he's going to be a 20 homer guy. But I think he kind of went from like a 7 homer guy in empty batting average to like, maybe this guy can sneak 12 or 13. Certainly Seattle isn't the comfiest confines for a guy like that either. So that kind of, knocks it down a little bit, but I do think he could be a batting average play. We've seen how sort of Jacob Wilson has played out. I don't think the contact is quite that good. He is a little bit younger. I do think that the angles are probably a little bit more consistently better, and he's hitting the ball harder than Jacob Wilson did at the same age by a pretty, wide margin. So he's trending in the right direction. Do I think he's going to?
There's a need. There's probably a need. I mean, the bottom of that lineup is not very good.
That's the other part of it is maybe there's opportunity there. If there's an injury, whether it's at short or second base, he can fill in there. It's really solid defense. So the glove's going to keep him in the lineup where all these guys have early struggles. But, I do think that the trends are going in the right direction, at least, and the opportunities there. He's hot. He's productive. It's a playoff team that, isn't going to care about 40-man roster stuff or losing a year of, of control and that sort of thing if it's the best lineup that they can put out there. And, with Seattle, it's also probably going to be one of the more cost-controlled lineups, even if, they do lose that year. They're not going out and having to shop in free agency, et cetera. So not a huge upside guy, but, if he comes up and does provide good batting average, maybe, hits his way into, the top of the lineup where he's getting enough at bats, there's maybe a possibility there that the runs and the counting stats are kind of valuable. But, I don't think this guy's going to come up and hit, 15 home runs or anything like that. It's not going to be like a Rhys Hoskins the first month he got called up and hit like 15 home runs in, a month or whatever.
Just an aside, how do you say your last name?
Pontes.
Pontes. Okay. Because
it's one syllable. It's Portuguese. So we just kind of mumble everything out there.
But I just was thinking about it because you're in Devil's Rejects with us. I think you won a couple years ago. And this next name, there was kind of like honestly, I partner with James Anderson so that James Anderson can kind of tell me about the prospects a little bit more. I'm the model guy. I'm like, I'm like the veteran guy. This name I hadn't heard it before. So we had this big trade, like where someone gave up major league talent for CJ Kayfus in that league. I forget what the trade was, but tell me a little bit more about CJ Kayfus because he's kind of come on this year, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it's been building. Last year he was one of the big pop-up guys, just sort of among college bats from the previous draft. I have a decent background with him because I'm out here in Massachusetts and obviously doing what I do. I have access to the Cape Cod League, and I shoot out there a lot, so I see a lot of these college hitters previously, and saw a lot of Kayfus, sort of an undersized first baseman, corner outfield type. It's not a big body. It's kind of slender and athletic. But I think the left-handed part of it obviously stops him from being able to play third base. He's not twitchy enough to be like a shortstop or a center fielder or something like that. But it's not like he's like this big bodied, bad bodied first base only type. There is, maybe some ability for him to play a corner outfield spot. It's not huge underlying power. I'd say it's like fringe average exit data. The thing that he does really well, and I don't think it's all that different from Kyle Manzardo, like when he was kind of not putting up crazy
EVs. See a little bit of a Kyle Manzardo thing
it's
here.
Great angles, like consistently. Just he's a guy that is just making flush barrel contact with sort of everything. So he's like probably like a good VBA guy.
Huge BABIPs,
yeah, and like I think it's indicative of what he's doing. He's just really clean backspin. And I think this is one of the things that we haven't totally conquered. And I know that there's a lot of information out there, but like the idea that there are guys who hit the ball more efficiently off the barrel than others, almost like a four-seam fastball, right? Like there's spin on batted balls. There's certain guys where they hit the heck out of it, but they're cutting it a little bit more, so it doesn't sort of spin or carry as true. I think this is one of those guys, almost like Bregman, where he always kind of like outperforms like the underlying predictive data with his power because he has so much barrel control. So it's like pretty good bat to ball skills, but not like incredible or outlier. It's really good swing decisions, and he's patient, and he does attack a lot of stuff in the zone. I think what it is it's sort of just that batted ball magic that he just knows how to backspin stuff off the barrel. So it's not probably super loud. I think he's most valuable from a fantasy perspective if he comes up, can hit for a decent average, get on base, give you, I'll say over the course of a season, maybe it's like low 20s, like 18 to like 24 sort of homers, racks up some counting stats in that lineup. And then maybe plays a little corner outfield. He's played a lot of first base, but I think honestly, once he gets up to the big leagues, if it is with the Guardians, it's probably going to be more left field, right field, first base, DH on certain days, and they'd move him around. But it's just an interesting profile, and guys like this kind of fascinate me. That sort of like have this hidden element of like the hit tool. Like it's not just bat to ball, it's not just swing decisions. It's like, how do you hit the ball?
Is there Brian Reynolds a little bit?
Probably. Votto, I think, was like that. I think certainly Mookie Betts is like that to an extent. I think a lot of these smaller guys that can really spin it true to their pull side. And I've talked to Travis Bazzana and written a bunch of articles, and over the course of a couple of years of a decent relationship with him. But I sat down with him last year in Lake County right after the draft, and we were kind of talking some hitting concepts. And that was his big thing, is like, I want to be able to get to pull side power because I'm a smaller guy. I'm not going to power it out to the middle of the yard, and I want to be able to spin it true consistently to my pull side. And I think there is an element there of like those guys that kind of outperform, their body or their power because of how clean they catch barrels.
The deal, in case anybody was worried, we do update a little bit about Devil's Rejects. It's a good league because it's a stand-in for like the deepest prospect oriented league. You know what I mean? Like 20 teams, open universe. So CJ Kayfus was traded to Savannah Bananas for Savannah Bananas got Trevor Story, Ryan O'Hearn, and Kenley Jansen for CJ Kayfus. So I think that actually kind of puts him in context a little bit. Like, he's not going to get you an elite major league guy. All these guys have questions. Trevor Story, is he near the end? Ryan O'Hearn, is this just a pop-up year? Kenley Jansen, is this near the end? So he didn't get like a
Yeah.
a crazy haul. But those are all major leaguers. And so if you've got Kafis, or if you want Kafis, that at least gives you a little bit of context. I think we had one more name on the major leaguers that might help in the major leagues this year.
Yeah, I had thrown a couple names out there. One was Nolan Mlan. It's just a matter of how the Mets sort of handle his innings. He's really interesting because he was a two-way guy sort of coming up. I think was a football recruit at Oklahoma State as well. Stopped hitting because he had like an insane amount of whiff. He was one of these guys that like could hit the ball a million miles an hour, would hit a ball 450 to dead center, but also probably whiff 40% of the time. So he hit a little bit as he came into pro ball. They stopped all that. This offseason was his first full offseason as a pitcher only. It's a crazy slider. It's like a hard, like mid to high 80s, like sweeper. It is filthy. Fastball.
Oh man, the model loves it. 125 stuff plus.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably gonna pop like crazy on stuff models now that it's on Hawkeye.
But they like both his fastballs.
Yeah, they're not bad. It's not, maybe like the traditional sort of shape that blows those models away, but both of them are hard. Both of them move a lot. And, I think the two-seamer in particular is really sort of because he was almost all four-seamer prior to this. Now, having that two-seamer in the back pocket, I think, really has gone a long way. And I think this even starts where he's thrown it more than the four-seamer now. The four-seamers almost become like, an off-speed pitch, almost like how the Red Sox initially did with like Tanner Houck when he was actually productive and not giving up 8-9 runs every time out.
Is he a lower slot? I mean, is he a sinker sweeper guy at heart?
Yeah, I think he's a sinker sweeper guy at heart.
And he's added other pitches, right? Like
and there's like other shapes that you could add as bridge pitches or situational stuff that he can throw in to sort of keep you off balance. But I think what the Mets have done with their pitching development over the last 2 or 3 years.
Good. Like they're just all popping.
Really good. It really is. I mean, there's all these like late round college guys with interesting traits that like they brought into the development system, and
they have an undrafted free agent that's popping. Oh my God, they've got all sorts of guys.
Yeah, Jonah Tong added a new changeup, and it's like completely unlocked his arsenal because he had a great high ride four seam ride cut fastball, but really like it was a kind of a bad slider, and then the changeup like came and went. Just started. I wrote an article about it, but started using a Vulcan grip, which he had used, but he had used it like like a typical Vulcan grip. They put it over like the horseshoe, and it just started to move differently. And it was like it almost moves like a splitter off of his four seamer now. So there's like this huge vertical difference between like the VAA on the four seam and now the VAA on the changeup.
Oh, nice. So you're a Tong believer.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And the slider's still kind of iffy, but it's something he's cognizant of and working on. And, I have every
that's
confidence they'll do that.
Philosophically, that's a tough one for me to overcome sometimes.
Yeah.
I definitely have a bias for, do you have a slider? And,
yeah, me too. If you're a righty.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as a righty, it's part of why, I was actually a little bit down on Roki Sasaki coming into the season because I was just like, there is no slider there. And it's something that I worry about sometimes with prospects. If you're change up first, like Wisenhunt, is there a good slider there? Or is that just all that change up?
He's at least a lefty, but like, that's certainly what anybody who's change up first. It's not awful if you're a reliever, because I think like their situational stuff. We've seen a lot of relievers that just have these filthy change ups that they can kind of make it work in one inning. Or even like Koji Uehara, like whatever his name is, from, like the Red Sox, like that guy threw nothing but like changeups. Like we've seen that.
Tommy Conley, right?
Yeah, but I think the issue is when you're a starter, you got to be able to turn the lineup over twice. Like nowadays, they're not asking you to go 7-8 innings every time, but you got to give
at least twice.
Consistently be able to like competitively give me 5 innings. And when guys don't have a breaking ball or sort of a bridge pitch or something in between, it's hard to believe in it. Especially like if it's a 2-pitch guy with like Chase Burns, whatever, 80-90% of his usage is a 4-seamer and that slider. But the slider and the 4-seamer are so good that it kind of eliminates like 70% of at bats anyway. So the 10% of those other 2 pitches, it's fine. But I think it is a concern.
I even, was engaging in talks for Logan Henderson in our league, and it was a notoriously difficult person to trade with, Tom Trudeau.
Oh man.
So I just threw my hands up at some point. I was like, let's move on.
7 trades and a dissertation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he was telling me all about how his model loves Logan Henderson. And I believe it because the minor league numbers are great.
Yeah.
But I have I couldn't get to that point where I'm like, okay, I'll just give you everything for Logan Henderson, because I was like,
yeah,
I don't think there's a slider there. So I don't know. We're running out of time. I do want to hit these guys real quick. Here's some should we skip over maybe to the potential top 100? Let's go.
Yeah, let's do that.
Bit deeper. So these are guys that may jump onto a top 100 list, and we'll finish with these three guys, just so that people who are looking for prospects to add right now, who are building, maybe these guys will make a big move on next year's list, or the next time the list come out.
Yeah, and we're going to be updating the top 30s early next week. So we should have a new top 100, I would imagine, probably mid to late next week. We did a big re-rank after the first month of the season, and sort of, moved on some guys. There's still a few players left that I think have continued to perform and maybe answer some questions. A big one for me is the athletics gauge jump, and talk about organizations right now that seem to be hot in the minor leagues. It's the Athletics, and they've obviously
really
with. There's more pitching in that system right now than I had seen in a while. And it's even guys that, like, I think a lot of us had written off, like Gunnar Hogland had a decent season last year, but has looked a little bit better even than he did last year. Louis Morales, who pitched in AAA last night against Bobby Miller, huge stuff. Cuban signee they got a couple years ago. Our internal stuff model with some of the data that we get, he's always like, jumped off the charts with 2 or 3, like, plus to plus pitches, big velocity, really good slider, etc. He's had a really good year. He's still really young. He's in AAA and has actually performed fairly well, considering it's the PCL in Las Vegas, and all you have to deal with the elevation and the parks and everything. But Gage Jump has been the one that's been most impressive. He was a big high school recruit, Southern California CIF guy that, like, stood out in those tournaments. Kind of ballyhooed, went to UCLA. Things didn't work so well. He ended up getting injured. He ends up transferring out, gets 1 season at LSU last year, is kind of their de facto ace, and has to jump into that role, obviously, after Paul Skeens. Pitched well, not incredible, but well. Everything he's been this year has been, like, dominant. Jumps, doesn't pitch after the draft, which is what's happening with a lot of these college arms, obviously, that get some volume. Goes to high A, dominates the Midwest League, gets a call up to Double A a couple of weeks ago. And since then, I mean, he's allowed, like, 1 run every 2 starts. He's not walking anybody. It's something crazy, like a 65% zone fastball rate. And if you look at the clusters on Synergy with the fastball locations, it's all, like, high and, like, in spots that guys really aren't going to hit. He's not jamming middle fastballs. But even if he does, it's 94 to 96, touching 97, 98 from the left side. Low release height, flatter VAA guys, a little bit shorter, not a ton of extension. It's maybe like 6 feet, 6'1" of extension. But it is it's a lower slot, and it's a lot of efficiency. So it's kind of weird because, he's generating like 17 to 18 inches of vert. It's a pretty flat, like 4.4, 4.5 VAA. And it's got velocity. He's got a couple of breaking ball shapes. He's got a curve ball that's really like a 2-plane banger in the low 80s, and then like a baby sweeper in the mid 80s. Really throw mostly those. We'll throw a changeup every so often, but it's not a great pitch for him. But he's in the Texas League now, and he's handling that. And that is one of the tougher run environments in the minor leagues. And he looks great, and I think the stuff is there. And
ERA starts with 0. He's got 35% strikeout rate. I'm interested.
Yeah, and I'll send you the data over on the pitches after the pod. But, like, it's pretty crazy. Like, his fastball command is it might be a 70. Like, just wow, what he's producing right now. You don't see guys with zone rates like that aren't, like, just hammering middle fastballs.
Oh, that's cool. I've seen this other name, Serota.
Mm.
Where have I seen him? Is he an Angels prospect?
No, he's a Dodgers prospect.
Oh, that's it.
And it's and they tried for a long time to get him into the system. So he was drafted out of high school. He was a New York, Connecticut area, you know, around the city high school guy, fairly highly touted prospect. Ended up committed to Northeastern of all places, which is very strange because it's a mid-major, good mid-major, but still a mid-major. And the Dodgers took him in the 19th or the 20th round in 21. He didn't sign. He gets to campus. First 2 years he was on campus, he was like, you know, seeing, you know, college national team guy, like, you know, type invitee, you know, highly touted, ranked as a first rounder, comes out his draft season and tanks. He was bad for the first month or so against not great competition, kind of picked it up late. The Reds end up drafting him, I believe, in the 3rd round last year. Doesn't debut for the Reds. And the Gavin Lux trade happens where
that's where I knew the name from.
They get Serota thrown in. Serota gets into the system, and lo and behold, his one problem that he had was pulling the ball in the air. All of a sudden, Serota has like a 10-degree pull side launch angle. He's got like a 27% air pull, and he's, you know, got like a 94 mile per hour average exit velocity. The 90th is like 107 or 108. He's hitting the ball harder. He's hitting the ball in the air more. He's hitting the ball in the air to his pull side more. Always had outrageous swing decisions. A little bit passive, but he's one of these guys that he's kind of passive in the way that he's going to walk 11, 12% of the time, even when he gets up to the big leagues, and will put up outrageous, you know, K to BB numbers now. So kind of interesting because, you know, gets on base. He's athletic. He's a center fielder. He can run a little bit. There's maybe some sort of 5-tool, 5-category in fantasy upside with a guy like this, and the defense will keep him there. And like right now, the Dodgers have like 5 outfielders that might be top 100 prospects.
Jose De Paula, Zero Hope.
Yeah. And then I think Eduardo Quintero, who we just added to our top 100. He's a guy who's in Rancho Cucamonga that probably could be in high A, but the outfield in high A is Hope, De Paula, and you know, and George, and then Serota. So like they even have like 4 good outfield prospects just on that Great Lakes team. It's an embarrassment of riches, and you know, I'm sure they'll find another 2 outfielders that will, you know, backfill these guys as soon as these guys either get traded or graduate.
Oh my God, they're gonna trade it. I wonder which one. I love that they probably had that adjustment ready for him, you know, in high school, and they just held on to that adjustment until they got him from the Reds.
It's a story of dedication and not giving up. The Dodgers just kept going back to the well. I bet you they had him queued up in like the next pick that they had after the Reds took him. You know?
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. And well, not to be the Reds do have a prospect that you've got that might jump onto the 100 here.
Yeah, and I think he's a tough sell because it is sort of a bad body corner infield.
I'm surprised because he's stealing bases.
Yeah, he's moving a little bit better than people think. But I think it's one of these things with Sal Stewart.
We didn't say his name yet. Sal Stewart.
You know, third baseman with Double-A Chattanooga. So he's not too far away. He's 21, still a couple years away from like the 40-man roster. So I don't know if he's up this year, but maybe if he hits enough and there's an opportunity there. But it's just really good bat to ball skills with a bigger body. So, you know, like mass moves mass, and sort of, you know, is able to
but the demonstrated power hasn't quite been there yet.
Yeah, it's not huge power, but he's also one of these guys that doesn't really sell out for it either. It's really like so it's not one of the profiles that I go crazy about, but it's also getting to a point where he keeps performing at every single level. You know, he's young for the level, no matter where he's been. And it's hit tool with like, you can sort of project the power to come. And for him to be able to get to it, because the EVs are pretty good. They're certainly there. He's just a tough sell because it's like if he ends up at first base and he doesn't hit for enough power, you know, the bar to clear there is pretty high. But, you know, you look at who have been the most productive hitters over the last 2 years in the minor leagues, and Sal Stewart is is right there in the conversation. So I think sometimes with guys like this, it just gets to a point where it's like, are we kind of ignoring the obvious too much, even if it doesn't fit into the box of, up the middle, athletic, twitchy players that have a bunch of tools?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, this has been a pleasure. I hope to see you again, maybe in Arizona this fall. And it's always a pleasure when I do see you. And thank you so much for helping me out today and coming on and helping our readers out with all this this gold, this prospect gold. And yes, I bow down to the prospect Jesus.
I appreciate it, Eno. Have a good one, man.
Thanks, Geoff. All right. Well, thank you to Geoff Pontes for Geoff Pontes. Let's do that again. All right. Thank you to Geoff Pontes for coming on. Baseball America scout. Just really great knowledge there. I don't know how to do the fancy thing that DVR did where he's got the CBS rostered rates. So what I did was I went and looked at the most viewed and the most added on CBS. That's an easy little click, 1, 2, 3 click. And I just thought these would be players you would be looking at because other people are looking at them for your weekend waiver. Lance McCullers has a nice 2-start at Pittsburgh, at Cleveland. I do think that he's more one of these players that I want to know what the matchups are. This stuff will tell you that it's above average, but it is really the slider and the curve. And we saw this before the injury, even where he was pushing. Remember that one time in the postseason where he just like only threw sliders. And so he's pushing 33% on the slider plus 15% on the curve. He's only throwing 20% sinkers. And that's his and 9% four seamer. So he's really not throwing many hard pitches. I don't know. There's just not a lot of models for success for somebody like this. I have to think that this is going to blow up in his face sometimes, whether it be by walks or homers or people sitting slider, people reacting to this mix. But all that said, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, I'm taking him for this 2-start. I would put him as a one of the maybe probably the best 2-starter in the upcoming week. So if you're in a weekly league, I could see even going past, for me, streaming is sort of $7 to $11 out of 1,000. I could see pushing that up into 13, 14, 15. Do you think you might keep them around for the next 2-start week or for certain matchups going forward? Chris Paddock is another name that I even added to my league leading Autonew team. It's a head-to-head, and I just wanted another option. I don't think that he's as good as the recent results have been because the strikeout rate for Chris Paddock is not great. The stuff plus is not great. But there is something that the Twins seem to be pretty good at getting the most out of these guys with great command. And I could see him, having like a 4-1, 4-2 going forward and just being careful with the types of starts that you give him. In terms of what he's got coming up, he's got Seattle on Sunday and then Toronto the next week. I would like him for that Seattle start. I don't know if I want him for that Toronto start. Ryan Yarbrough is somebody that everyone's looking at, and he's got he's finishing up a 2-start with the Dodgers on Sunday. His next start is Boston. Those are not great matchups, but I would like to say that the Yankees did find something. I wrote a piece today about the Yankees and all the things they've done for Max Fried and Carlos Rodon and different guys over the past couple of years. They gave Carlos Rodon a better changeup. They gave Ryan Yarbrough a better changeup. And so now he's got a slider that's plus, a changeup that's plus. And despite the poor velocity, he's got 96s and 97 stuff pluses on his fastballs. So, 88.4 is always going to make you nervous. And I don't really like him for those next 2 starts, but I do like him in deep leagues. I do like him as a stash. I do like him like as a circle for when he gets better, when he gets better matchups and he's a better situation. Slade Ciccone is another guy that a lot of people are looking at. I think that they did tweak his changeup in Cleveland, and he's always had a good breaking ball. He's a similar where the fastballs aren't great, And so I don't think he has the greatest upside. I don't know if I believe this 31% strikeout rate in a short sample, but again, another sort of 4-ish ERA guy that can hang around. He gets the Angels on Sunday, does Ryan Yarbrough. I mean, and we're talking about Slate Coney at this point. He gets the Angels on Saturday, and then next week, Slate Coney gets Houston on Friday. That's an iffy one for me. I might take a chance on some of these 2 starters I'm about to list that are owned in fewer leagues over that Slade start. Dickie Fitz is back. Richard Fitz has a 2-starter, Angels at New York. I don't love that at New York, but maybe he'll be motivated. That's his old team. The Angels start is a decent one. Here's my favorite 2-starter next week. And this is a guy that maybe you just keep around on your roster for these 2 starts because they're going to happen every once in a while. Jonathan Cannon gets Detroit and Kansas City this week at home. I'm into that. And then Mike Burrows gets Houston and Philadelphia at home. I'm okay with that. These are deep league options. Also wanted to mention Robert Stevenson all the way back, 132 stuff plus, was throwing heat. He's now my new favorite for saves when Kenley Jansen gets traded. He's in Anaheim, and the stuff looks all the way back. He is a great stash for the future. On the hitter side, a lot of yous out there's looking up Colt Keith. I dropped him a while back, and yes, the splits have improved. In the last month, we've seen him hit for a 283 to 325, 535 line. Colt Keith has 141 WRC plus, and that's backed by a slightly different batted ball mix. But the real difference has been a lot more line drives, and I feel like that comes and goes. And he also, though, has been pulling the ball more and going up the middle of the field. And that is something that is really important for Colt Keith, is mixing that ability to go the other way with the pull power. I'm just at this point, I think the ceiling is low. And I think that, he's basically in the Jake Cronenworth territory where, yeah, he's a decent player. He's going to hit some bombs, not that many. He's going to hit for an okay average, but not that great. He's going to steal some bases, but not that many. They're really just the Spider-Man meme. I don't really know that there's, a real difference between the two. I don't think the ceiling is great on him. He's not an acquire for me in fantasy leagues. Even if you look at the most rosy projection for him, it's 260 with a 326 average and something that would equate to 15 homers and 2 steals over the course of the year. It's okay. It's just, not my bag in terms of, acquiring him as if I'm rebuilding. It's just more like, oh, he's on the wire, and what I have is worse than that, I guess. Ernie Clement, is 29 years old. He also, I don't think, is necessarily, a building thing. What he does is he will give you batting average if you need batting average. And, I guess the question is, like, where does he play when they're fully healthy? He's been playing short, second, third, first. He plays everywhere. If they're fully healthy, does he have a place to play? Because I know that, Bo Bichette's been a little banged up. He missed a game with injury. At third base, you've got a mix of sort of Barger going to the outfield, but I think Barger is going to take third base. And then second base, Andres Jimenez is, on rehab right now. So I think Jimenez will come back. I think Clement's a true utility player that's just playing a little bit more than usual. I don't think that you need to go get him. Jake Myers was another guy that people were looking at. He's a little bit like Colt Keith, where I'm like, it's fine, but I think over the course of a full season, he's somebody that would normally hit 260 with 15 homers and 15 steals. It's like, it's okay if you need whatever, a fifth outfielder, it's fine. There's his best strikeout rate of his career, best swinging strike rate of his career for Jake Myers. So I do believe that the batting average can stay north of 250. But it's not great batted ball stuff. He doesn't pull the ball much, sort of sprays it around with not great power. And he's also at this point 28 years old, so he's not somebody I'm looking to build with. But if you just need a fifth outfielder right now, he can be your guy. I'm very happy to have many shares of him in draft and hold. I've been using him and not using him. It's based on the schedule, it's been fine. Connor Norby was involved in a very scary incident where Jason Adam hit him with a changeup in the head in the San Diego game. I don't know why people aren't necessarily looking at him. I guess he's playing. He's back. He got up from that and argued his way back into the game. His barrel rate 10% for Norby is good. His max CV is not. This is something he's done a lot of, though, is have okay barrel rates and bad max EVs. So maybe he's just a guy who gets to his power well, but he's doing it with a 17% whiff rate. So I don't even believe the 276 batting average. I think he could be a 230 hitter that hits you like 25 homers and steals you 10 bags over the course of a season. That will be a building block for certain leagues, but it's mostly deeper leagues. I don't think 10 and 12 teamers need to do anything other than maybe have him at the end of the bench to see if he can work on that strikeout rate a little bit. But remember, he's a little bit older, 24 years old. He's a Marlin. That's what these things happen. All right. And then on the deeper end of things, we've got Gavin Sheets. People are looking at him. He is now passing the 50% owned level, and that's because he's hitting for power, hitting for batting average, and a lot of it looks sustainable. Nice, the best barrel rate of his career. The best max EV of 5 years. And he's doing it with, he's being a little bit more aggressive. He's getting the ball a little bit more, swinging and missing a little bit more, but it's really working for his game. And he seems to be a guy that they need in the lineup right now in San Diego. I think this will continue. But if you look at his it's a lot of DH. I think this will continue even if they acquire some money, because he doesn't look good out in the outfield in left field. And so a poor, bricks for hands Gavin Sheets in left field, or Tyler Wade, who has no bat in left field, or Jason Hayward, who's currently injured but didn't look that good. Even if they acquire somebody, I think Gavin Sheets could be their DH. So I could see picking up Gavin Sheets and playing him in most leagues. I think he's going to end the season with something like, a 260 average and 25 to 30 homers. So that could be useful on most teams. Parker Meadows is on his way back, so people are looking to get ahead of that. He's in the middle of a rehab assignment. I guess they're making a little bit of a longer one because he's already 40 plate appearances into it, but he's been playing well on that rehab stint. And I think there's just a job waiting for him. Dan Myers is coming back. He's older. We've talked about him a fair amount, but at 29 years old, I don't think he's a building block, but I think that they don't have enough, great players to play every day in Miami. So he's going to play every day, and he's going to, have the type of talent that should put up 260, 12 homers and 20 steals in a given season. It's like a little bit like a Luis Garcia of the outfield, maybe. I think that's definitely useful. We talked about Jesus Sanchez last week. Angel Martinez is probably the guy who's a little bit like Jesus Sanchez, that I think he's underrated. Power, speed, not great amounts of any of them, but comes with good contact, and he's playing almost every day in Cleveland. So I also don't think that Lane Thomas is back, and I guess he got injured, but Lane Thomas's metrics defensively are not great in center field. So I could see Martinez still having a great role even when Lane Thomas is back. For example, there were days where Lane Thomas DH'd and Martinez was center field when Lane Thomas is back. Martinez also played second one of those games. So there's enough defensive versatility there that I would buy on him. And just to finish things off, over in Kansas City, they've got a rave going on. They've been using a 27-year-old outfielder named John Rave every day in right field since they let Hunter Renfroe go. I know that the numbers look really good for Rave in the minor leagues. He's 27 years old. You have to basically minus away almost all of that and assume that he's basically below league average player at AAA. That's what we found when we talked about age adjustments. And maybe he made an adjustment to get to more power, but in the major league level, so far, he hasn't hit a ball that super hard. He's striking out. I don't know how. I think they'll basically give him like 7 to 10 days to make his case before Jack Caglione comes up. Nick Lofton, I think, has a little bit more defensive versatility. He was walking like the mad in the minor leagues, 21% walk rate in the minor leagues, and he can play the infield. He can play the outfield. I think he has more staying power on that roster. So I love Raves, but I don't love the Rave. I think I would take wait for Jack Caglione or take Lofton over him. And that's the best I can do on one leg. And thanks so much to Geoff Pontes for coming in and giving me a breather and talking, because this has been difficult. And we're going to have Derek back early next week, and I will be very happy about that. So please, again, join our Discord, like the video, subscribe, and thank you so much for listening. It's been a marathon today, and I'm going to go back to bed, I think. Thanks for listening.